Hey everyone, this is Tony Holbein. You are listening to the Revenue Formula with Mikkel and Tony. In today's episode, we are talking about GTM Velocity, how to out-execute your competition, and we give you 3 tips on how to accelerate it. Enjoy. Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Fullcast, the only AI-powered platform that streamlines your entire sales cycle from plan to pay. Customers report up to 80% cost savings, 20% growth in pipeline, and 30% boost in RevOps efficiency. With modules like territory and quota management, routing, and capacity planning, Fullcast adapts to your unique needs, whether you need one solution or an all-in-one platform. Visit fullcast.com, book a demo, and mention the Revenue Formula podcast to unlock an exclusive premium gift just for listeners. And now, enjoy the show. I mean, you already have glasses, Mikkel.
Yeah, but I need glasses with Zoom in order to see what those buttons say. Because
maybe
so
that's a great startup idea. Let's do that. Glasses with Zoom.
Yeah, but people are gonna go, wait, for like Zoom meetings, or what are we talking about
Both.
here?
Both.
Yeah. Now you can't have
or Zoom
meetings.
info. I mean, what is it?
But it's also highly inconvenient. Just imagine you're driving a car, and all of a sudden the Zoom meeting starts, and you're like, what? It's not gonna work out. It's not gonna work out. It's not gonna work out. It's terrible. Ugh, anywho. So you just got back from a long break. Well deserved, by the way. You just got back from a long break. What was the trip home like?
Yeah, it was fun. So, I mean, we spent 3 weeks in Thailand, basically, in the north and in the south, which is fun. Everything's fun. But then, obviously, everything was super smooth, and then the trip back...
Not super smooth.
it went a little bit in a different direction. So, everything was fine. We jumped into the cab, got to the airport, checked in. Everything is good. First flight, everything is great. And then we landed in Delhi. So we kind of had a stop in Delhi, which is kind of actually on the way.
Yeah.
And then first of all, these guys do not have their stuff under control, honestly, right? The next thing we knew...
What guys are we talking about here?
No, the guys running the Delhi airport. Let's just say it like that, right? And we were basically kind of going through security there. And basically the metal detector blinked red for everyone all the time.
Ah, okay.
So everyone had to get checked by a person with the other metal detector. So everything took forever. Then, some flights were more urgent than ours. So people were shoved in front of us in line all the time.
Yeah.
And then we finally get out of this thing. And then basically our flight went from boarding to final call.
Oh, great.
Right? So this is Cecilia and I, so my wife and I, and our 2 kids. And we basically kind of grabbed them, start running, not realizing that this was a 20-minute distance.
Run.
Right? So we are running like crazy. We actually wanted to eat something. We get 1.5 hour layover. All of this evaporated.
Yeah.
We wanted to eat something. We wanted to buy some snacks for the flight because this was the long leg back to Copenhagen. All of that stuff, forget about it. All of this gone. We arrived there at the, check-in. And yes, we were, kind of, some of the last folks there. And then we sat down, and then, the plane didn't move for 1.5 more hours.
Yeah.
So basically, they decided at the gate to just put on the final call sign just to get people going, right? So then we're in the air, maximum pissed already at this point, by the way. Then we're in the air, I'm watching a movie with, my son. It was all good. Everything is cool. And then suddenly Cecilia just looks at me and asks for a bag.
Oh, no.
These things.
Yeah.
And off she went. And, that then triggered what do we do now? Kind of me alone with the two boys. She was trying to lay somewhere. There was a whole other story developing there. And then, I kid you not, 2 hours later, one of my boys starts also puking.
Yeah, great. And then you sit and wonder, when am I going to get hit now? It's like...
Yeah, and then we flew. Well, all kinds of other things are happening, but basically, kind of 2 puking people out of 4.
So wait,
we were known in a nice radius around us.
Yeah,
everyone knew us. All the stewardesses knew us. Was fantastic the way home.
Yeah. So the thing is, are you just super lazy and stealing my intro? Because if you go back, 5-10 episodes, when we were in Thailand, by the way, and had the same thing happen,
No, I was going through the whole vacation, which was also 3 weeks, just like yours, by the way. I went through the whole vacation, was like trying to find some drama. It took me until the last day of the vacation to finally find it. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to write this down. This is going to be a fun story for the introduction. And there we go.
There we go. Then here we are. And now we're going to segue into talking about, I guess, having a 4-hour work week to really speed up the go-to-market.
Yeah. So I mean, this is starting to be a bit of a thing that I'm noticing actually, and let's see how much of this
people
we're going to
working
cut
4
out.
hours a week. Yeah.
No, let's see how much we're going to have this cut out. But I'm seeing this more and more. Americans working like crazy. You know, even you and I having a 3-week vacation is like for them what we're unemployed. I mean, we are kind of unemployed, but we're unemployed for 3 weeks. It's like, you know, you don't have vacations like this. So this is a European thing. And I think there's some good to it, by the way. But there's more of a notion and like, I don't know, this is not even millennials or Gen X or Gen Z, or it's like, oh, let's work less. We don't want to work too much. We want to get paid a lot, but we don't really want to show up. And like all of this is shit anyway. And you know, I think it should be 4 days a week, not 5. You know, we used
to
work
200,000 a year.
Yeah, exactly. And I need to have my work-life balance. I need to chill with my dudes. And at the same time, you kind of see how some of this is happening in the US, but there's like a different work ethic kind of that's happening there, right? There's a couple of other things also going a little bit better, besides some of the political scene, you could say. A couple of things going, you know, a little bit better. And I just feel like we're Europeans, we're like dragging our feet. We're kind of not getting where we want to go in terms of being really important on the planet. And at the same time, everyone is actually like, oh, let's opt to be a bit more lazy. Let's just chill a little bit more. Let's just enjoy our life while we have all of the welfare until it's kind of evaporating in 10, 20 years. And it's like, I don't know. I'm starting to not like that.
No, I get it. I was just thinking also about like, and probably this will get cut out, but at least we have Greenland. You know, we could maybe just lease that out instead of selling it. Can we just lease it out and make a profit and then do a 4-day work week? That would be wonderful.
Or at least break even with Greenland.
Yeah. And probably, I guess, all the Americans and rest of Europe, they're gonna go, Greenland. What are they talking about? Google it. Google US, Denmark, Greenland. Have fun.
People know.
People know. Probably they know. Yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna talk a bit about go-to-market velocity. Let's start off by just real quick. Why does this matter and what is it, right? I think it's probably not really a concept. I think when you say velocity, people will usually think sales velocity, which is how, I don't even remember actually. It's a formula, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically the revenue formula divided by the sales cycles.
So it's how quickly you earn money, I guess, to a degree, right? Yeah. And I think for you and I, what we talked a bit about here is when we talk about market velocity is really the speed of execution, which is why, we have this funny 4-hour work week intro.
Yes.
Because really there's this old saying of outworking the competition. There's this joke of, hey, I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you, right? Yeah. And it is a thing in competition. There's no doubt that the faster you can execute, you know, the better you're going to be off. But there's also competition at play here. And we wanted to focus a bit on, well, how can you actually speed up the go-to-market? What are some of the things that you might be completely ignoring that can help you out?
Yeah. And I think, you know, where do we get this concept from? Actually, we get this concept from development, product development, right? The whole idea about shipping fast and giving, you know, showing to people and testing out and getting feedback and so forth. That is a totally legitimate feedback or, you know, way of thinking in product development, right? Yeah. Kind of, there's this, if you need 3 months to generate an MVP, you only get 4 MVPs per year, right? Yeah. So if you were to gut this down to, you know, 1 month or 6 weeks, kind of, you would to actually increase your shots at the same target by 2x or whatever it might be, right? And in that realm is a totally legitimate and normal way of talking about it, basically kind of the velocity you can execute stuff. For some reason on the go-to-market, that's not really the case. It feels like a new thing on the go-to-market to talk about go-to-market velocity.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think, especially in sports, this is something they will focus on. They know that time is kind of finite in one game. And whether it's actually baseball or basketball or football or American football, doesn't really matter. There's going to be a finite run to the game. Mm-hmm. And in that time, you want to create as many chances to score, basically win the game, right? And I think for some reason, when you transfer that to business, time is not necessarily finite. At least it's hard to gauge how finite it is. For a startup, it's obviously runway, but who thinks about that when you're in the go-to-market team? It's like, that's the CEO and CFO problem, right? But I think you need to look at within maybe a year, are you maximizing then the amount of opportunities you create in order to score a point, right? And that's what we want to focus a bit on today. And I know the first piece you said MVP is speed of failure, actually.
No, exactly. So kind of the first thing is, as you build out your go-to-market, there are going to be a couple of things going to work out and a couple of things that don't work out, right? And I think that's applicable both for teams that are very at the early stages of starting the go-to-market, but it's also applicable for teams that are much, later on, 50, 100, 150 million in AR. And the reason is that as you work through your different channels and saturate those channels, you will always need to find another thing that adds something on top, right? Yeah. Either it's sometimes because the channel is dying or its channel is just flatlining. So in order to generate growth, you need to add something else on top. So that actually pushes everyone all the time into kind of a perpetual motion of trying to improve stuff and figure things out and get better, right? And this doesn't only need to be at the super top level of SEO and SDRs and whatever it might be. It might be further down. It might be within the SDR team. It might be a tactic within the SEO channel or wherever kind of we're working on, right? And executing experiments and figuring out what you can do in order to improve, and then also seeing the failure happen. So then you don't need to focus on this again, right? Yeah. Doing this faster is basically a way for you to increase your go-to-market velocity, right? And I think Mikkel, you played around previously with high tempo testing, which is almost Correct. Kind of in this direction. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's actually a book by Sean Ellis called, I think, The High Growth. No, you know what? I'll put it in the show notes. There's a book by Sean Ellis. It's Hacking Growth. And he has this framework of deploying a lot of tests. And the backstory is he looked at companies like Twitter, X today, but at one point they were growing pretty fast up until the IPO. The reason businesses like that were growing really fast was they were doing a high pace of experimentation, right? So maybe 1 out of 10 tests would succeed, as in outcome positive, we're going to now implement it and keep it. And instead of just running 10 tests per year, if they could do 10 tests per month, they would grow faster, right? Because those tests were focused on improving growth, certain growth metrics. Now, if the competition would only do, let's say, 2 tests per month, well, then you're definitely outrunning them in a pretty massive way. And you would see this, if you plotted it out on a graph, by the way, it would be exponential, the improvements stemming from this stuff, right? Because you get compounding interest. And I think that's the interesting piece. And so when we ran high tempo testing, we would look at how much time are we going to allocate to this test. That's when we're going to then stop the test, review the data, right? We would have pretty hard mechanisms in place. And we would also have a clear marker for, is this a success or a failure, right? And if it's a failure, obviously, let's extrapolate the learnings. If it's a success, let's now go and implement it and monitor that it actually keeps on delivering the outcome, right? There's a whole different process there. And I think to a large degree, when you talk about small tests, this is fairly easy for you and I to agree on. We're going to run a test on the website. It's going to be these 2 pages competing. It's going to take this long for it to reach statistical significance, and then that's 2 weeks done. But I feel like when you run a test on a new motion or a new market or a new wherever, you still want to have certain kill criteria also for that in place, because it's just on a different scale, but albeit you want to also, I guess, in that scenario, fail faster.
One thing I just wanted to kind of put a pin on here is you can use it for smaller stuff. You can also use it for bigger stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of the time it takes to prove something differs. Right. If you have enough traffic on the website and you do an experiment there, you can figure this out in a day or 2 or a week or 2. If you want to implement a completely new motion from scratch, it might take you a year, right? Kind of there's different timeframes to it. But the interesting piece here, I think, for everyone to take away is like, you should have a kill criteria. Like at what point do we stop believing in this thing and, basically stop wasting resources? Because if you don't do that and you get to the point where you otherwise would kill the project, you're looking at this and then you have the sunk cost fallacy. Like, oh, we already invested so much into this thing. We should keep this alive and maybe around the next corner, then everything. It's like, no, like have the kill criteria, clearly defined up front, and then basically helps you to shut this thing down, right? And in terms of, entering new markets, so what we actually did was we rolled out, so in one of the companies I worked for as CRO, we kind of rolled out a PLG motion, which was back then, kind of established already in the industry, but not yet kind of the standard. And we basically decided we want to go really heavy into the next market. We had lots of regulatory stuff, salary pieces. So it's like, should we go to France? Should we go to Spain? Where should we go next? And we basically decided, actually, we don't know. We did a bunch of desktop research, but we just didn't know. So what we did is we basically created a PLG motion, stripped the product a little bit down so it wasn't that deep. It was easier to onboard, rolled it out globally, and basically then saw where the interest might be highest and then kind of invested additional resources, both marketing and product, in order to go further into those markets, right? And that's kind of like an experimental way to expand and kind of find another growth layer. It's not another channel, but it's another geo in this case, right? In order to layer these things on top.
So I think the point really here is also you need to find a way to slim certain things down to the point where you can execute it fast and still learn, right? Yeah. So some would do the fake door approach, even have like no product and just say, we can do it and then actually test out, right? And I think it's risky to get caught up in this fact that it has to be perfect. This is what the end destination for us should look like. So that's what we're going to build, versus saying, no, we're going to remove a bunch of functionality from the product and go in super simple to a lot of markets and figure out where does it actually work. Maybe run some advertising behind it to speed up that kind of, to accelerate the learning and validation of which market to go for, right? And I think that's just super important. Can you simplify things down rather than overcomplicating it? Because as soon as you go through that route, like I remember, by the way, implementing PLG at Falcon, is like all kinds of things you need to think about. Like, what do we do if there's an existing opportunity that an account executive owns, and blah, blah, blah. Like, try and remove all the complexity you can to just go and learn really fast. Because, then you'll know and can potentially have some of those successes implemented faster as well.
And to be honest, like some people listening say, okay, growth hacking, that's like 10 years old now, or growth hacking, that seems like some startup does. It's true, but you will even catch people like Elena Werner, like Dropbox, and all kinds of other companies she worked for, talk about this, not in terms of growth hacking, but in a very scientific, instrumented way to kind of get better and better and better and better, right? Yeah. So really, this is something that, is very well established in the product development space. It's very well established in the PLG space. And we think some of those pieces actually should be taken into consideration for a broader go-to-market application. Right? So really kind of folks, don't think about this as like the 22-year-old growth hacker that writes a little bit of JavaScript and kind of can connect some things. It's more of a structured way to figure out what to do and then also what to stop doing. Yeah, right? But that's just one example out of the go-to-market velocity we want to talk about.
I think quite frankly also it's like when you plan out your quarter or half year or whatever, and you sit and look at those projects, just think for a second about how much time are you allocating to them? Like how long will it take for you to ship it? Can you ship it sooner if you compromise on certain things? How do you determine whether it's a success or not, right? I think some of those pieces have to be very clear, unless it's like one-off almost campaign elements that now it's shipped, done, on to the next. But you do want to figure out what has that kind of staying power, and not necessarily think of it as now we need to run a split test that gets statistical significance. That's not even the point here necessarily, right? So the other is, in terms of speed, is hiring. Mm-hmm. Speed of hiring. I don't know about you, Tony, but at least from my part, when I've worked with teams and you had a specific team working in an area and someone resigned and left, it kind of left that team in almost like a void or a vacuum that now they need to scrape by in order to survive, kind of, right? We are not expecting magic to come out of that team until we go in and find a replacement. And even then, person needs to ramp, right? So I've at least found that the speed at which you can hire and potentially also, I think, anticipate some of these changes on the team matters a great deal for the consistency in executing.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of different, approaches to this. One is like, hey, if you have like a high volume role or team, AEs, SDRs, and CSMs and so forth, I think it's you can start to predict and anticipate some of those things, right? So I basically had an understanding with my CFO to always be one headcount above my allotment, which then would level out usually, a month later or so, which was actually fine. So in the end, we basically kind of hit budget exactly, but we always had a little bit, more folks that we were able to hire. So I think there's some ways around this like that. And I think then the other piece is also just being mindful and helping your recruitment team and HR team to be fast in hiring those folks. And this is not let's stumble into a decision or something like this. This is simply also about, if you want to get the best guys onto your team or ladies, it's really important just to kind of get the right offer in front of them as fast as possible. Like there is a thing where people are just simply going with another offer, especially if they're great folks, that might kind of create a situation where you miss the opportunity to even try and secure them because maybe HR or kind of recruiting was kind of slow in actually executing this, right? Yeah. So, and I think what people then are kind of forgetting, what HR needs to understand, and kind of those were things that I basically kind of sat down with them. It's like, hey, your inability to put those people into their seats, it's costing me X hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue per year. And they were suddenly realizing, oh, wait a minute, that's insane, right? Kind of they realized that this is a full impact, which I think people should be just sitting down and doing this, calculation on a napkin. Actually, kind of every time there's a delayed hire, it's costing me X thousand of euros of MRR per month that we basically kind of otherwise would be heading and might be missing budget by, right? And one solution here was actually, because they were like, hey, this is insane. We're strapped for resources and we're losing so much money because we're strapped for resources. What we then actually did is from my sales budget, hired a recruiter. So that person then could basically help, fill those spots faster, right? And, I get it. Not many people are in the situation right now where they kind of need to hire as quickly as possible, right? That's probably not the reality out there. But those small gaps that you're creating, they're not only creating issues in your like revenue planning and formula and whatever you have, they're also creating issues with the rest of the team that's straining and overstretching and basically kind of getting brittle because of it.
It's actually also why I have a preference for working actually with external partners, because that gives you the upside of, they're not going to quit. They might raise the prices and then you need to replace a certain vendor that you're working with, whatever, on design or development or what have you. But there's so much flexibility in that sense. So execution wise, it's almost less of a risk. But regardless, there is something around ensuring that the team you do have in place, that you have consistency there. And also, just things like, what do you call it? Succession planning, that you have succession. That stuff. Yeah, succession. Sorry, that you have that kind of buttoned up as well and have some structures in place. So you're not, having to invent the wheel when shit hits the fan, basically.
Another thing in recruiting is also figuring out what you don't want to spend your money on for the recruit to learn, right? Yeah. So what does that mean? So let's just say you hire an AE and you have $250,000 deals, right? Your ACV is $250K for whatever reason. Do you want that AE to learn how to close those deals while you're paying that AE? Meaning, if that AE previously has closed 25K deals, do you actually want to pay for that person to learn how to close the big stuff, or do you not, right? And that actually will help you in determining whom you want to hire for this position. And the list goes on. For an SDR, entry level, like, do you want that person on your dime to figure out if they like sales? Or do you not want to pay for that? Same in marketing, if you're in a very specialized space, do you want that marketeer to, on your dime, learn that super specialized, deep knowledge of your space in order then to help you or not, right? And the reason why this is important for velocity is basically ramp to a degree. How quickly can you get that person fully ramped up and knowledgeable for the job that they need to do?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think this is also closely related basically to the next and last piece of speeding up, which is the capacity, right? I think this is something you at least focus a lot on when it's the sales team. It matters a great deal that you have the closing capacity to handle all those incoming meetings that are being booked, whether it's from inbound, outbound, doesn't really matter, but you need to have the capacity to close them. Otherwise you'll lose money, right? Yeah. You'll lose money. But in the same turn, you also need to consider what is the capacity of all the other teams that aren't account executives, right? I think the product team has a pretty good understanding of what is our capacity in the sense of what can we actually build in the next cycle, right? They have that buttoned up, because otherwise they will basically get screwed having to backpedal all the time on not being able to release. But I think on a even a marketing perspective, it seems like quite often we make the mistake of planning too many projects, still forcing them through, and also not stopping and saying, hey, how can we free up time on this person so they can double down on an area they're doing really well at, that they're really excelling at, right? So I think just one stupid example is you have an account exec team. They spend, let's just say 20% of their time entering data into some system. If you could reduce that to 10%, that's kind of significant all of a sudden, right? And I think that's the mindset you need to have as well, right?
I think my experience is that people rarely think about capacity in the right way. I think people are pretty stupid about this, actually. And I think most product teams have this on their wraps, as they have the experimentation.
We always admire product, always.
No, yeah. So, I mean, to a degree, we actually do, right? And you know, some of them obviously use, you know, agile and whatever kind of frameworks around this. And what I and you and I actually used to do was implementing some of those agile frameworks also into revenue operations, into marketing, into some degree into CS leadership. It doesn't really work with sales. But basically kind of using some of those ways of organizing the work in a little bit of a better way, right? Yeah. Kind of creating, hey, this is what we want to do. And, you know, based on the past, what we have achieved, actually, this could work out. And the reason why people don't actually, you know, do any of these things is I feel they don't think about capacity in the right way. They don't think about it in the right way for AEs also. Like, this is the same for account executives. Capacity for them is like quota.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean? Well, it actually means like, well, you need to have, you need to work so many deals, and because some of them convert, and for this ACV, and how much time do you actually spend per deal, and then how much time do you spend per lost deal, and that time then at the end needs to sum up to probably 30 hours a week or maybe 25 hours a week, because you also need to, take into consideration vacation, sickness, going to the bathroom, lunch, internal meetings. And people are not thinking about it like this. They're thinking about it way too abstract, right, in terms of quota. But once you break it down into much more practical terms, in terms of jobs or things that need to be done, then you can actually start applying it to other roles as well. Revenue operations, CS, marketing, and so forth. And then you get to actually a true understanding of what capacity actually looks like for your team, which can be revealing. Can be revealing in a way of like, oh, wait a minute. Yes, they have 250K quota, but actually they have quite some free time, and I could give them more opportunities. Actually, they could do more. Or you come to the opposite conclusion. It's like, actually, kind of that's not going to work out with our conversion rates, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But that bottom-up way of thinking of capacity, you can roll this across the whole organization, actually. And I think if you then optimize for that, what's going to happen? Well, you will see you need to cut internal meetings, right? Yeah. One of my kind of favorites is like, do you really need a one-on-one for 1 hour every week? Could it be half an hour every week? Could it be an hour every other week? Could it be an hour every month? Like, do you actually need those one-on-one hour time? And there's some like crazy examples of the CEO of NVIDIA or CEO of Revolut. Basically, they have like 30 reports, direct reports. They don't have any one-on-ones with them. I mean, they interface with those folks quite frequently in those different meetings and so forth, but they don't do any one-on-one management time, right? And there are some reasons why that works for them, and maybe they just, want to be cool and, I don't know what. But there's probably some truth here also to be had for how you manage your team and how much time you put on top for them to do stuff internally, right? So it's really a choice for you to try and strip some of that stuff away and then, tightly manage that time is not being used to chill, but to actually do some focused work on what they need to do.
I think it's also like we had this calendar exercise with reps to see how busy they are, right? I think if you're in marketing, revenue operation, whatever department really, I would encourage you to try and open the calendar of a few of the team members and see how many meeting blocks are there. How much idle time is there? Meaning a short time between meetings, because you won't get any work done. If you have half an hour between meetings, you know what? It's going to end up being meetings anyway, most likely in that time, right? And then how much free time for real work is there, right? And I think in many companies, you will be shocked. You will be shocked at how little time there is to do real work. And then it becomes very clear that a way to increase capacity is to kill some of those meetings.
Yeah.
Now, that might mean you need to stop certain initiatives. So back to some of the tests you might be running, or even initiatives you've run forever that aren't yielding any real outcomes. Maybe consider killing them, because they're basically drag on the team at the end of the day, right? And I think that's where you got to go back and maybe listen to some of the episodes where we talk about the Formula One example of just consistently improving the speed at which you can perform the pit stop.
And I think one nuance to also just think about is, I'm really terrible at this myself, is there's a real cost to ramp up.
Yeah.
Like if I have an hour between meetings and I have a big task I need to do, I don't know, build a pitch deck or something that. I'm going to look at this gap and be like, you know what? I'm not even going to start. I'm sorry. It's like before I get into it, it's going to take me 30, 45 minutes to really get into it. Yeah. And then I have an effective work time of 15 minutes before I need to do something else. And maybe I need to even prep for the other thing. So that hour in between is kind of lost. It's kind of over. So, once you start thinking about ramp up and ramp down basically between tasks and between meetings, then actually the next thing should be like, okay, so those meetings that we're having, they should be at the beginning or the end of the day, and help those folks that really need to focus on things like, someone writing a blog post or someone writing code or, basically kind of deeper work, help them schedule their day in the most optimal way, so they don't have these ramp up, ramp down issues actually. Yeah. And I would even say, even if someone is aware of that, I would even say they probably wouldn't voice to a superior being like, hey, don't schedule me for 2 p.m. because that's going to fuck up 3 hours of my day. Schedule me for 9 a.m. You as a boss, you as a manager, to actually encourage people to try and find ways to move meetings to the edges or kind of have them in blocks in order to minimize this ramping up, ramping down time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the other interesting thing this makes me think of is also what you choose to do with the time, right? Which is also a lot to do with capacity. And you so think about a superhero. You get to have one superpower. I think I heard this from Michael Siebel at Y Combinator. You get to have one superpower, one thing you can do really, really well. You don't get to have like 10 superpowers. It's like that just doesn't happen, right? And I think it's the same point here. When you look at the team, especially this goes for, I think, marketing or revenue operations, you're going to have folks who are really strong at one or two things, at driving one or two outcomes. And you want to make sure that they have the capacity to focus on that. You want to make sure that they're not necessarily diluting that attention with other things where they don't have the skill set, right? So I think there's a lot of optimization that can happen on just looking at what are people actually spending their time on, and are we directing the resources in the go-to-market in the right way to obtain velocity.
And at the end of the day, right, kind of if you do this really well, you're kind of going to be considered a good leader, a good manager. People are going to be happy. They're going to be productive. You might need fewer people to do the same stuff. You might have same resource getting more output done. There's a lot more ways to improve your output and be more efficient than AI. Right? Yeah. Yes, Mikkel and I have been talking a lot about AI. I think a lot of people are picking up on this, obviously. But the good old traditional stuff shouldn't fall away. That's probably still, a massive efficiency win for you if you execute well on these things. And then obviously the AI stuff will follow.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. So let's see. We created maybe part of shaping the term go-to-market engineer, and now we're doing the go-to-market velocity. Let's see what it could be next time. Go-to-market blank. Let's see. It's going to be fun.
Let's do that. Thank you everyone for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. By the way, it's for free. I'm not sure if you knew that. And if you want to share that with some of your friends, please absolutely do. You're helping to grow the show. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.